how do you root if it's reliable and if it's eyewitness testimony? What kind of things do you look for while you're signing that? And of course, everybody knows we're going to shift and go to the gospel soon, but I want to get in the mind of how you think as a detective looking at a document like that.
So here's a good example of this. This guy's name, I think, was Ronald Kozak, and it's in the news, so it's not like I'm giving away an investigative secret. And he confessed to the entire thing and said he was there when it occurred. He did it, so he's claiming to be there. So he not only saw it as he was doing it, he's claiming to be there. Okay. It's a long confession, about 1,000 pages. So the first claim is...
Wait, 1,000 pages, not just 1,000 words?
A 1,000-page transcript, yeah. Because, it's double-spaced, and the investigator asks a question, then Ronald responds, blah, blah, blah.
Got it.
So there's this big... It's 2 notebooks. It was 2 red notebooks. So I'm looking at this case, and I'm thinking, okay, so why would I consider this, even to begin with? Well, because he's making a claim. He's making the claim internally in the document that he was there. So I got to test it. Now, is he an eyewitness? Is it reliable? How would I know? Well, does the stuff he's telling me match up with the evidence we have? We have some evidence that kind of shows us the kind of murder this was. And he's going to have to describe, the sad thing about it was that the initial investigators gave him too much information in advance that he just kind of leveraged to make up a story. What you want to do, honestly, is to give him no information. You tell me what happened, then I'll see if what you're saying matches the evidence I have in hand. And once we did it that way, it didn't match. And we did solve it ultimately with DNA years later, and it wasn't him. So he was lying the whole time. So what am I looking for? Is there some claim? And also, like if I said, I did this and I took her body to the hills in Oxnard, but there is no Oxnard. Or he describes Oxnard and he describes it inaccurately because he's from the East Coast and doesn't even know what Oxnard looks like. Well, then I'm starting to doubt. But if he accurately describes this, I can at least say, well, he's familiar with the area. So I'm trying to sort out the lie from the truth, because every lie contains truth. That's what a good lie is. Have you ever played that game, Spot the Lie game, where I'm going to tell you, well, what do? I tell you a true story, but I change one detail. It's really hard to catch it, because it kind of sounds like a true story. I've just changed the detail. I could tell you how my dog ran away, give you every detail that makes sense, but actually it was my cat that ran away. So it is a lie, but it's harder to catch because all those other details line up. That's what we're doing in these kinds of investigations.
That is not a game I would want to play with you. That would not be fair.
Well, you'd probably fool me because, we are, look, I'm not a Sherlock Holmes, right? Don't you love watching that show where Sherlock spots some little weird thing over here and he connects all these dots back to the killer? That doesn't really happen. But we do have some processes in place. That's why we test eyewitnesses under those 4 criteria that I always talk about, because there's a test in place. But number one, does it appear to be an eyewitness account in the sense that it is not just giving you a bunch of facts? For example, compare the Gospel of Thomas with the Gospel of Matthew. I don't think anyone looks at the Gospel of Thomas. You might say, well, maybe somebody was there to hear these statements, but it doesn't even appear to be an eyewitness account because it does not describe in any kind of chronology any series of events. It's just a set of proverbial statements of Jesus. That could be true or it could be false. How would you test them? He's not saying he entered, Capernaum and he went into the house of Peter's mother. He's not making claims about a sequence of events that is typical of eyewitness testimony. And also, if you compare like the Gospels to like Peter Pan, like the author of Peter Pan never claims that it's history. He never claims he's viewing this as an eyewitness. The Gospel authors are quite different. Luke says, I didn't see this stuff. I was with Paul in the book of Acts, but I talked to the people who were the eyewitnesses. Oh, you mean there were eyewitnesses? Apparently. Well, if there were eyewitnesses, according to Luke, like what are they witnessing? There you go. Now we're looking at claims. The only question is their testimony reliable?
Okay, so in a court of law, you would say eyewitness testimony is equal to other kinds of testimony. In assessing
other kinds of evidence. Eyewitness testimony is a form of evidence equal to other forms of evidence.
Good clarification. Thank you. When it comes to the Gospels and their reliability, would that same thing apply? Like whether they're ultimately eyewitness accounts or not, doesn't determine if they're true? Or would it help our cause more so if we have reason to believe that they're eyewitnesses?
Well, okay. So I think the identity of the eyewitness doesn't matter to me. But the
Okay.
question is this written by an eyewitness does matter to me.
Okay.
Because the easiest thing to do to lie about Jesus is just wait till everyone who knows the truth is dead and then say anything you want. Because there's no one, even if it's not written early enough, there's not even, forget about the fact that I can't be an eyewitness if it's written in the 2nd century. The better thing is that I can't be fact checked by an eyewitness if I write it in the 2nd century. So the question is it early? That's important to me because it's harder to lie early than it is to lie late. And then could it be tested in some way? That matters as well. So I think in the end, those are the things, those are the highest values I hold. Because by the way, this happens all the time in cold cases. You're 30 years after the case and they thought they interviewed all 5 people who saw it, but it turns out there was a 6th person who was never comfortable talking about it 30 years ago because he or she says, I was too close to the suspect and now I don't fear the suspect anymore. So I'm willing to talk today. Well, okay, were you really there? I mean, how do I got to test this thing because you can make any kind of claim. I don't know if you were really there. I got to start to investigate those issues. Were you really there?
Okay, so we haven't gotten into your case yet, but do you think the Gospels could pass as testimony in a modern court of law? Is that relevant or not relevant in determining their reliability and historicity?
No, they would not be admitted in a court of law, and it is not relevant. And here's why: because there's a hearsay rule. So hearsay, basically, you under in the United States, you have the right to confront your accuser. And if you cannot confront your accuser, that testimony is not allowed to be heard. So if I came in and said, "Hey, my dad told me that he talked to this guy and he said X," well, someone's going to say, "Well, then get your dad in here." Because you didn't hear it, your dad heard it. You can't testify for your dad. You can't be cross-examined. I can't. You can't ask me the question. Well, what was he wearing? I don't know. My dad just said he said this. Okay, then get your dad in here so I can ask all the questions that can cross-examine the accuser.
Okay,
but my dad's dead. Okay, well then you can't. That testimony is not coming in. Now there are some exceptions in federal law. Okay, I'm not going to forget about that for a second. In the cases that I work, that's hearsay. But that's a standard that we developed for reasons of protecting the accused. It's not a standard we would apply. In other words, we would rather free, we don't want to convict anyone falsely. We'd rather free 100 guilty people than falsely incarcerate one innocent person. So what we do is we set a standard that's really high. But if you held the hearsay rule against claims related to history, there's virtually nothing you could know or would be allowed to know outside the lifetime of an eyewitness. So if you said, well, what were my great grandparents like? You couldn't ask your grandparents because they can't be, you can't ask your parents anyway, for sure, because how are they going to know? They're trusting what their parents said. You need to get to the actual eyewitness. Well, can you imagine how short reliable history would be? It would be in the lifetime of like two generations. And then after that, everything's hearsay. So you can't trust anything in history. That's not how we do history. So you can apply the criteria that we use for eyewitness reliability to historical claims, and you should. But you shouldn't think that the fact that we can't bring in hearsay in a criminal trial means we could never use it to determine history. If that's the case, be ready to throw out everything you think you know about your own family.
Gotcha. Fair enough. All right. We're talking with J. Warner Wallace about his 10-year update to his book, Cold Case Christianity, one of the top books that I recommend for Christians and non-Christians to engage the Gospels.